The first thing I noticed when I stepped back into my apartment was how heavy the silence felt. It was not the comforting kind of silence, not the hush of a safe home, but the tense quiet of a place that remembered too much absence. My boots left faint damp marks across the hardwood floor as I carried in the duffel bag that still smelled of salt, oil, and the bitter tang of long nights in foreign places. I had been gone for 36 hours on something I could never put into words, and as always, the return felt unreal, like stepping through a door into a life that no longer fit. I bent down to untie my boots, and that was when I saw the envelope. It lay there, half slid under the door, waiting for me like a reminder I had not asked for. Cream-colored paper, expensive stock, silver trim along the edges that caught the thin slice of morning light leaking through the blinds. For a moment, I did not move. My breath caught in my chest the way it used to when I spotted something out of place in a hostile room. The instinct was the same: analyze before touching, memorize every detail before committing to action. Finally, I reached down and picked it up. The weight was too elegant, too deliberate. My fingers brushed over the embossed lettering, and I froze when I read the words. The Bowen family. Not Angela, not even Ms. Bowen, just a collective address. A lump rose in my throat before I could stop it. My family's handwriting. No, not even theirs, this was printed. Perfect cursive from a machine, flawless and soulless. For a few seconds, I just stood there with the envelope pinched between my fingers, the memory of other letters flashing in my mind. Field orders written in shorthand. Mission codes scrawled across sealed pouches. Goodbyes etched on scrap paper before storms rolled in. This was nothing like those, but it cut deeper because it pretended to belong to something called family. I tore it open carefully, as if it might explode. Inside, the invitation gleamed on glossy cardstock. Emily Bowen and Daniel Ward cordially invite you to their wedding celebration at the Harrow Estate, New York. My eyes locked on my sister's name. I had not spoken it aloud in more than a year. I traced each curve of the letters like they belonged to someone I used to know. Emily. She had been fading from me for years, like an image on a screen dimmed one notch at a time until the glow was gone. I had tried to reach her once on her birthday. Sent her a message that took me 2 hours to write and only seconds to be ignored. No reply ever came, just silence. Now here she was, a bride, smiling on cardstock, smiling for a life I was not part of. The details of the invitation blurred together, the date, the venue, the time. What stayed clear was what was missing. No note from her. No personal line that said she wanted me there. Just a QR code to scan for attendance, as impersonal as checking into a hotel. The phone buzzed on the counter. My mother. The message was short. If you come, wear gray or beige, nothing bright, no greeting, no glad you received the invitation, just a warning disguised as etiquette. I placed the invitation on the counter and let out a laugh that sounded more like a cough. My chest burned as if I had swallowed smoke. I leaned against the kitchen island and let the silence fill the room. Outside, a delivery truck groaned on the street, birds chirped somewhere I could not see, but inside it was too still. The stillness pressed against me, the way silence had pressed against my team once in ruins where we waited for orders that never came. I opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of tonic left from a previous assignment, and drank it straight. The bitterness coated my tongue. It tasted like forgetting or trying to. The phone buzzed again, but this time it was a call. I answered. You saw it. The voice cracked slightly with static, but I knew it instantly. Michael Ward, a name I had not heard in months. He had been one of us once, one of the few who knew how silence could suffocate as much as it could save. The photos or the invitation? I asked, my voice flat. Both, you okay? I didn't answer. Silence again. He knew me well enough not to push. You're not actually going, are you? I looked at the envelope still resting on the counter. The elegant script stared back at me like a dare. I think I have to, I said. Why? The word felt heavy. I swallowed. Because they already erased me, and now they're celebrating without even checking if I'm alive. The line was quiet after that. Then Michael's voice, softer, almost resigned. Then be careful. The call ended. I sank down onto the couch and pressed my hands to my face. The fabric of my jacket smelled faintly of gun oil and old dust. I pulled it tighter around me as if I could shield myself from the truth of what had just arrived. My family had erased me long before I knew what erasure felt like. They had done it not with bullets or files, but with silence, with absence, with a refusal to see me. Now this envelope had pulled me back toward them like a thread tied to a ghost. I sat there until the sunlight shifted across the room, then forced myself to stand. My duffel bag was still half open near the bed. I picked up the invitation again, held it over the trash can, fingers trembling. I could have ended it there, could have walked away, but I didn't. I folded it neatly, slid it into the front pocket of the bag, and zipped it shut. The decision settled into me like cold water soaking into fabric. Not for them, I told myself. I wasn't going for them. I was going for me. I left before dawn because leaving at night felt too much like running. The city was still half asleep, traffic only a thin ribbon of headlights and red eyes. I packed lightly. A neutral dress that would satisfy my mother's instruction. A plain jacket with a lining that could hide what needed hiding. A small clutch that did not look like a tool but was one anyway. The duffel went into the trunk of a rental. The engine turned over with a cough and then steadied. I eased onto the wet road and watched the dark peel back. As miles unspooled beneath me, the quiet of the highway let older memories surface. There were stairs in a Syrian safe house that groaned on the fourth step and never on the third. A door in a northern village that was painted blue to signal to neighbors the man inside could be trusted. A hand signal my team used that meant do not speak now, just breathe. None of those things belonged to the life my family imagined for me. In their version, I had simply gone away and not come back in the shape they preferred. Trees began to flame orange and red as I climbed into the hills. Fog hung low over fields, snared by fences and rolling stone walls. It was pretty in a way that made people lean back and say it is so peaceful here. Peaceful is a word that has always made me cautious. I have known too many places that were peaceful until they were not. The Harrow estate appeared at the end of a long drive, flanked by maples that surrendered their leaves in rustling sheets. The iron gate was open. A sign near the entrance welcomed guests in a font that whispered money. Ivy wrapped the stone pillars as if trying to pretend age where there might only be maintenance. I parked near the back of a gravel loop and watched for a moment as other cars pulled in. A woman stepped out of a black sedan in a sheath, dressed the color of cream. A man held his jacket like it was armor. Their voices rose and fell with that practiced ease people keep for occasions where the right tone matters more than the truth. I straightened my jacket and walked toward the side entrance. The air held the sweet warmth of cut flowers and something sharper underneath, like new varnish. Inside the vestibule, a check-in table waited under a chandelier that had been polished within an inch of its life. Two young women in black dresses typed on sleek tablets and smiled with the efficient brightness of people paid to keep everything frictionless. "Name, please," one of them said without looking up. "Angela Bowen." Her fingers paused on the glass. She scrolled again. I watched the tiny movement of her eyes and the tightening of her mouth. I have always been good at reading people when they think they are invisible. "I do not see an Angela Bowen," she said. "Try Bowen family," I said. She typed again. Relief flickered through her expression like a small dim light. "There it is. You are listed." She tapped a new screen. A supervisor appeared with the soundless speed of a well-trained shadow. "Welcome, Ms. Bowen," the supervisor said, already turning slightly to guide me away. "We have arranged a comfortable place for you." The words slid off her lips without touching a conscience. I followed through a corridor that opened into a vestibule outside the main hall. I could see the grand room beyond. High ceilings and chandeliers and rows of chairs already set in perfect arcs. An installation of framed family photos glowed along one wall, curated to suggest warmth. I studied them as we walked past. Childhood birthdays, a graduation, two parents smiling at a child I recognized. My sister appeared in many. I did not appear in any. The supervisor stopped at a small alcove. A sign on a folding stand read "Overflow" seating in soft lettering designed to be kind. The chairs were upholstered in a neutral fabric that wanted very badly to be soothing. I recognized a distant aunt from a summer I could barely remember. She nodded once and then looked back down at her program. "We appreciate your understanding," the supervisor said. "Someone will bring you a schedule." "That will not be necessary," I replied. She smiled her professional smile and vanished the way competent staff do. I sat. The chair creaked. Early light filtered through tall windows and laid stripes across the floor. People flowed through the space in careful streams, each carrying the particular energy of being both observed and observing. A quartet began to tune somewhere behind the double doors, gentle strings pressed flat by the acoustics. The whole place felt like a stage that had been dressed to whisper old money. I let my eyes travel. The best way to stay unseen is to look like you are politely watching. I counted exits. I marked the positions of the cameras mounted in corners. I studied the staff. One server moved with an odd rhythm, a fraction two measured for simple hospitality. His uniform was correct, shoes polished, hair neat, but the left cuff of his jacket held a crease that did not match the right. a tiny flaw no one else would notice. The name on his badge did not match the quick roster I heard at the table when I arrived. I added him to the quiet stack of things to verify. It is a strange thing to sit on the edge of your own family and measure a room like it might try to swallow you. The last time I felt something like it, a storm was building just beyond a city wall and the radios were thick with clipped voices. I pushed the memory down and folded it carefully. There would be time for ghosts later. My mother arrived then, as if the house had been waiting to inhale. She swept in wearing cream and pearls and a posture that could cut glass. For a breath, she looked directly through me. Then recognition softened the muscles beside her mouth and moved her voice a half step warmer. "You came," she said. "I did. You look well," she said, and her eyes dropped in a quick check down the length of me. "Thank you for dressing appropriately." She reached out as if to touch my sleeve, then changed her mind. The moment hung between us like a thin thread and then snapped. She moved on with her companions, laughter blooming a second later in a tone polished by years of practice. My father followed sometime after. He was talking to a man in a navy suit, expression animated in that measured way he had perfected at fundraising dinners. His gaze fell across me, caught, held, and then flicked away with a small nod, as if acknowledging a piece of furniture he had once owned and now kept in a back room. I felt anger rise and then settle. Anger is useful when it moves you toward the right door. Useless when it keeps you staring at a wall. The quartet began to play something gentle and almost familiar. Guests took their seats with the rustle of silk and wool. Staff glided in with trays of water and quiet smiles. The double doors at the far end opened a fraction, and a sliver of the main aisle came into view. In a ridge of chairs along the center, a man sat with one elbow on his knee, not clapping like the others who clapped for nothing in particular. Our eyes met. He looked like someone holding a question. Then the moment broke, and he was another face in a tailored suit. A young attendant appeared at my shoulder with a slim printed program. "Ceremony schedule," she whispered as if it were a secret. "Thank you," I said. I turned the program over in my hands and traced the order of events. The choreography of a perfect day. Vows, rings, a blessing, a recessional, photographs on the west lawn. Words on a page that tried to flatten the reality that nothing in life obeys a schedule unless it suits the powerful. Someone sat down in the chair behind me and leaned forward just enough that the hairs on the back of my neck lifted. I did not turn. When you think you are being watched, turning is a gift. The person exhaled, a small almost laugh, and then stood again. Their footsteps moved away, soft, careful, like water drained through fabric. I let my shoulders loosen a degree. Not safe, only balanced. Then the room shifted. It is hard to explain how a space changes when a bride enters. Conversation tightens into a single current. Heads angle the same direction. Time gathers itself and waits. Emily came into view down the central aisle, a spill of silk and light. For a moment I forgot to breathe. She was beautiful, the way someone is when they do not yet know what is tied to them. She passed my row without seeing me. I watched her face for a crack, a flicker, any sign of the child who used to sneak into my room at night after a nightmare. There was nothing. Only composure, the kind that can take years to rehearse. I did not wave. I did not stand. I let the distance settle like snow. When the officiant stepped to the podium, the lights dipped to a romantic warmth and held steady. Then they flickered once. Twice. Not enough to make anyone gasp. Enough to make me look at the ceiling rig. 2 tiny blinks that might have been nothing, might also have been a signal. I glanced toward the side wall where the audio equipment lived. A technician in a gray polo adjusted the board with the habitual confidence of someone paid well to be invisible. A server carried a tray past me stacked with small toasts. I watched his hands. No tremor. I watched his path. Direct, with a purposeful slowing near the audio station. He paused just long enough to lean in and say something to the technician. They did not look at each other. Their mouths moved too little to be casual conversation. I would have missed it if I had not been looking. The officiant's voice flowed over the room, smooth as a lake. I heard very little of what he said. Words about love, about union, about family as a circle that holds. There is a kind of language that wants to erase anything that does not fit on the page. It is beautiful to listen to and hard to stand inside if you have ever been the thing that did not fit. I lowered my eyes and counted again. Cameras in corners, too. Additional mics along the center arch, one hidden near the base. Power cables run under a thin cover across the aisle. I located 3 security staff in plain clothes by the shape of their shoes and the angle of their shoulders. They are trained to watch the perimeter and forget the center. It is human to think trouble comes from the edges. I felt it then, a faint buzz along my wrist. Not a sound, a tremor. My body knew it before my mind did. Subsonic interference. I lifted my hand to scratch an imaginary itch and let my watch face tilt just enough to pick up ambient frequencies. The reading was low, but did not belong to the ordinary noise of a wedding. Something else was awake in the room. The ceremony ended with polished applause. Chairs scraped softly, conversations bloomed. The doors to the reception wing opened on a room dressed in gold and glass. People spilled toward champagne and canapés and the welcome distraction of food. I stood and drifted with them, nothing more than a shadow sliding from one frame to the next. Near the bar, a column of marble broke the flow like a quiet island. I stepped into its lee and took in the new geometry. Overhead, a web of string lights through a gentle net of brightness that could hide a camera at any point along its path. The music had shifted to jazz, soft enough to keep people close to each other. The centerpieces were high and symmetrical, the kind of design that looks beautiful in photographs and conveniently blocks sightlines. I was not the only person thinking about sightlines. Across the room, the man who had met my eyes before stood again, with that patient stillness I recognized. He held a drink he was not drinking. He glanced once at the raised platform where the speeches would happen later, and then at the door marked private down a side corridor. When I followed his gaze, I saw for a fraction of a second a shadow vanish through that door. Not staff, not a guest. The turn was too efficient. The shoulder line carried tension like a habit. I noticed then that the microphone on the platform had been moved since the ceremony. It now sat closer to the floral arch, joined by an extra cable that ran beneath the carpet runner. The mic itself was standard, nothing flashy, but the mesh at the top bore a tiny scar of heat. I have seen metal do that when it has carried more than sound. A laugh rose up behind me. I turned as if looking for a friend and saw instead my mother across the room, laughing with a circle that had closed itself without effort. My father stood beside a man I recognized from fundraising mailers. Emily was nowhere in sight. Her absence felt deliberate. There is an art to placing people where eyes will and will not land. I took a slow breath and let it thin. I was on the edge of something. You can feel it change the air when a hidden current is about to break the surface. I set my empty glass on a small table, adjusted the cuff of my jacket, and began to move, not toward family, not toward memory, but toward the part of the room where hospitality turned into a system. Cables, racks, ports, access doors. The language I understood better than the speeches printed in a program. A server stepped into my path and offered a tray. "Try the pear and soft cheese," he said. "Thank you," I replied and took one. His badge said Anthony, but the laminated edges were newer than the rest. The font was slightly wrong. Someone had printed a replacement in a hurry. The crease in his left cuff was still there. I let him pass and angled toward the side corridor marked staff only. A housekeeper came out with a stack of linens and held the door for me without thinking. I slipped through with a nod that looked exactly like I belonged there. The hallway beyond smelled of lemon cleaner and old wood. Around the first bend the noise of the party dimmed. To the right was the audio closet, door ajar, a braided cord of cables running into it like arteries. A tech hunched over a panel, his face lit by a small monitor. I watched his hands for a beat. Confident. Then my eyes found the box beneath the main board. A simple unit the size of a deck of cards, nested where a loop connector might go, small enough to ignore if you wanted to keep your job. The indicator light was steady and green. My watch nudged my skin again. I did not go in. Not yet. A direct confrontation in a closet is a good way to make a mess that benefits someone else. I backed away and let the door swing a little wider, like an accident. From the corner of my eye, I saw the tech glance up, flick the door shut, and then glance toward the end of the hall where the private door waited. I walked back into the party and pretended to be a woman at a wedding who had found a quiet corner to breathe. The quartet swelled. Glasses clinked. A voice announced that the couple would soon join everyone for the first toast. I stood in the doorway and watched the room adjust itself. There are moments when you know the day is about to bend. Not because of a sound or a shout, but because the air has aligned. The hair along my arms lifted. I felt the smallest smile pull at my mouth. It had nothing to do with happiness. It had everything to do with recognition. I was not here to be forgiven. I was not here to be welcomed in a photograph. I was here because the truth does not erase itself. If someone tried, they had picked the wrong room and the wrong sister. I stepped forward into the light of the reception hall, and the room swallowed me the way a wave takes a swimmer who knows exactly how to move with it. The reception smelled of roses and something sweeter, like spun sugar. Voices overlapped, laughter came in curated bursts, the soundscape of a gathering that wanted desperately to appear effortless. I blended with the crowd because blending had become a skill long ago, to look like I belonged even when I did not. I made my way to the far side of the room where the wall was lined with carefully framed photographs. Childhood birthdays, school graduations, family vacations. I stood in front of them for a while, not moving, not speaking. They were curated, selected for beauty and meaning. Emily was there in nearly every one, her smile wide and genuine, her place undeniable. My parents stood tall beside her, arms wrapped around each other or around her shoulders. I was nowhere. Not even in the corners of the frames, not even in the blurred background of a group shot. I had been edited out long before I knew editing was happening. This wall of curated history was proof that erasure could be done quietly, without violence, with only a careful selection of what to keep and what to discard. I pressed my palm against the hem of my jacket, grounding myself. I was not here to mourn what had already been erased. I was here because something about this day was wrong, and I knew instinct the way others knew family tradition. Michael had told me once that silence can scream louder than any bomb if you know how to listen. I heard it now in the way the crowd adjusted itself when I walked by. Eyes that glanced and then looked away too quickly. Smiles that faltered. The gap of years between me and them stretched across every step. I spotted my father again near the front of the hall, speaking to a man I recognized as a politician whose face had been on billboards last election season. My father's hand gestures were calm, controlled, his posture perfectly aligned with someone who wanted to project authority without effort. When his eyes slid across the room and touched on me, his conversation did not falter, but his jaw tightened. He gave the smallest of nods, an acknowledgement so minimal it might have been reflex. Then he turned back to his companion as if nothing had happened. I stood rooted for a moment, letting the wave of cold recognition settle. For years, I had trained to notice the smallest details in hostile environments. A subtle change in air pressure meant a door opening. A flicker of shadow meant movement behind a wall. Here it was no different. The details were just polished, dressed in silk and pearls. My mother passed by again, her perfume filling the air before her voice did. She smiled at her companions, her laughter timed perfectly with theirs. For a moment her eyes fell on me, and her smile twitched before she quickly smoothed it back into place. She did not stop. She did not acknowledge me beyond that single flicker. She had once been the woman who brushed my hair before school, who whispered prayers into the dark when I was afraid. Now she was a stranger who had mastered the art of omission. I turned away from the photographs and stepped closer to the bar. A young server approached with a tray of champagne flutes, his steps measured. His name, tag read Anthony. I noticed the way the laminate caught the light differently, too new, too crisp. His cuff was creased in a way that suggested hurried dressing, not the meticulous polish of the others. He smiled as he offered the tray, but his eyes did not meet mine. "Thank you," I said and took a glass. He moved past me and I watched him go, cataloging the details. Most people would not notice. I was not most people. The quartet in the corner began to play a softer piece, violins weaving a melody that made the room lean toward romance. The lights dimmed slightly, and a hush moved through the crowd. The double doors opened at the far end, and Emily entered with Daniel beside her. She was radiant in a gown that shimmered like liquid silk. The room inhaled as one, admiration rising like smoke. She looked perfect. But perfection is often the most fragile mask. I watched her walk through the crowd, her smile wide, her eyes bright. She greeted guests, accepted embraces, laughed at words I could not hear. She did not look toward me. She did not falter. Daniel looked every bit the groom magazines adore, handsome, confident, his posture claiming space. He held her hand as though he had already won something priceless. As the couple reached the center of the room, the officiant raised his voice once more. A toast was announced. Glasses lifted, laughter rippled. A man near the platform adjusted the microphone, his polo shirt gray, his expression blank with concentration. I saw the extra cable trailing beneath the carpet, running to a black box near the audio rack. My watch buzzed faintly again against my skin. The hairs on the back of my neck lifted. Something was humming beneath the music, beneath the laughter, beneath the carefully curated perfection of the evening. I had felt this hum before, in deserts where the air shifted seconds before an ambush, in cities where the silence thickened before gunfire. It was not fear that gripped me now, it was recognition. I sipped the champagne, the taste dry and bitter on my tongue, and let my eyes sweep the room again. Every guest looked normal. Every smile looked real. But normal is a costume people wear until it slips. I caught the man from earlier, the one who had locked eyes with me. He stood now near the back of the room, leaning casually against a column. He was watching the platform, not the bride. His drink remained untouched in his hand. His posture said patience. His eyes said calculation. The officiant called for attention. The room quieted, expectant. Emily lifted her glass. Her voice carried across the space, warm and clear. "I just want to say," she began. I did not hear the rest, because the microphone pulsed once. A frequency shift. I felt it in my chest more than I heard it. A low vibration, a signal masked beneath ceremony. The champagne in my hand trembled, a thin ripple across its surface. My eyes darted to the audio rack. The black box blinked faintly. Something in me knew with absolute certainty, this was not just a wedding. And as the applause swelled around me, my hand tightened around the glass. My family might have erased me from their walls, from their words, from their curated history. But whatever was happening here tonight had found me again, and I was not going to look away. The applause still clung to the air like perfume, but I could already feel the fabric of the evening shifting. Weddings are supposed to be about certainty, about repeating ancient words that tie people together. Yet the hum beneath the music told me something else had been tied here, something woven into the day like a hidden thread. I stayed near the margins as the guests spilled toward the grand reception hall. My family's voices rose among the others, blending into that polished sound of belonging. I carried my glass as if it anchored me, though I had no intention of drinking more. My eyes moved over every detail. The chandeliers were dazzling, but one bulb in the farthest fixture had been replaced recently, the glass newer, cleaner, its light a fraction cooler. The tablecloths were pressed, immaculate, but one bore the faintest crease where a package had once been folded tight. To most it would mean nothing. To me, they were tells, pieces of a language no one else had learned to read. The Harrow estate had been chosen for its grandeur, its symmetry, its ability to impress. But places like this are dangerous for another reason. They come alive with echoes. Every sound carried in ways people did not expect. That meant I could hear things I was not supposed to. A server muttering into a headset near the kitchen door. A door creak open in the far wing that should have remained shut. I took my seat again in the overflow alcove. A neutral position, close to an exit, with a wide angle on the crowd. Guests gathered in clusters, holding drinks, laughing with that rehearsed quality that came from wanting to be seen enjoying themselves. My parents were in the thick of it. My mother's pearls gleamed under the light. My father's posture announced him as a man who belonged. And I sat like a question no one wanted to answer. It was not long before Emily appeared again, her arm linked through Daniel. Her gown trailed behind her like mist caught in a current. I felt a tightening in my chest I did not want to name. She looked like every dream she had once whispered into the dark when we were girls. A white dress, a love that felt safe. A future she thought could not break. She passed close enough that the scent of roses clung to the air between us. Her eyes slid across my row and paused. For a heartbeat, I thought she might stop. But then she blinked, her smile unbroken, and kept walking. I became air again, invisible. The officiant led them to the head table, words smooth, practiced. Toasts began. Relatives spoke of family ties and blessings, of love that endured. The words stacked one upon the other until they sounded more like a performance than a truth. I clapped politely when the crowd did, but my hands never warmed. It was during the third toast that I saw him again. Michael Ward. He stood near the far wall, no drink in his hand, no name tag on his lapel. His hair was shorter than the last time I had seen him, his jaw a little sharper, but the way he carried himself was unmistakable. He did not look like a guest. He looked like a man measuring exits, like a man waiting for a signal. Our eyes met across the room. He gave the faintest tilt of his head, an acknowledgement, nothing more. But it was enough. I rose from my chair slowly, blending into the current of guests moving toward the buffet tables. I took a plate I did not want and made my way along the line until I slipped out of the main flow and into the corridor near the side doors. The air there was cooler, quieter. Michael was already waiting near a marble column, his voice low when I approached. "I didn't expect you to come," he said. "Neither did I replied. His eyes scanned the hallway, then came back to me. "You felt it too, didn't you?" I nodded once. "The hum? Then you know this isn't just a wedding." I wanted to ask how much he knew, but I already understood. Michael had always been the kind to notice what others ignored. If he was here, it wasn't coincidence. "What are they transmitting?" I asked. "Not sure yet," he said, but it's coming from inside the event, and it's dressed up to look harmless. My thoughts jumped back to the microphone, to the cable beneath the carpet, to the black box humming in the closet. Dressed up to look harmless, that was exactly it. We stood in silence for a moment, listening to the muffled applause drifting from the reception hall. "Why are you really here, Angela?" he asked softly. The question cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I thought of the envelope on my counter, of my mother's message, of Emily's smile that slid past me like I was a stranger. "Because they erased me," I said finally, "and I need to know why." Michael's eyes softened, but his voice remained steady. "Then you're not going to like what you find." Before I could answer, the lights overhead flickered. Not once, not twice, but in a sequence I recognized. 3 short, 1 long, a pattern, a signal. Michael's jaw tightened. "It's starting." I turned back toward the hall, the sound of glasses clinking rising like thunder. The guests were laughing, oblivious. The music swelled. Emily lifted her glass again, her voice carrying over the room, and beneath it all, I felt the hum deepen. Whatever was happening here, it had already begun. The air inside the reception thickened, though no one else seemed to notice. Laughter kept rising like champagne bubbles, bursts of chatter clinked against glass, and the string quartet leaned into a tune so graceful it felt almost cruel. I returned to the edge of the crowd, my pulse steady but sharper than before. Emily stood at the head table, radiant under the lights. Daniel leaned in, whispering something into her ear that made her laugh. The sound was clear and unguarded, a sound that had once belonged to us as children when secrets were harmless things whispered beneath blankets. I remembered that version of her for an instant, then it vanished behind the polished mask of the bride she had become. The hum pressed against my skin again, more insistent now. I followed the current with my eyes. It came from the platform where the microphone stood, its polished surface gleaming. That extra cable beneath the carpet was not just for sound. It was carrying something more, something threaded beneath the ceremony like a vein carrying blood. Michael slipped into the room from the side corridor. He moved with the same practiced ease he had carried in the field, scanning without appearing to scan, noting without appearing to notice. He made his way near the bar, close enough to the audio rig to see without drawing eyes. I caught his glance, brief but meaningful. Confirmation. The officiant raised his voice, calling for silence. Another toast. My father rose this time. He adjusted his jacket with the gravitas of a man who had spent his life rehearsing for moments when words mattered more than truth. His voice carried smoothly across the room. He spoke of legacy, of family, of bonds that endured through distance. He spoke as if I were not there, as if my absence had always been part of the design. Guests clapped. Glasses lifted. I set mine down. And then I saw it. The server with the mismatched cuff, Anthony, moved again through the crowd. This time he carried not champagne, but a small silver tray bearing nothing but a folded napkin. He placed it beside the microphone with a precision that did not belong to hospitality. No one else noticed. To them it was seamless, part of the dance of service. To me, it was a placement, a mark. My watch buzzed faintly once more. A steady tremor that aligned with the moment the napkin touched the stand. Michael shifted, his hand brushing his jacket pocket as though steadying something inside. His face remained calm, but I knew tension when I saw it. He had felt it too. The officiant invited Emily to speak. She stood, veil lifted, her hand trembling slightly as she raised her glass. Her voice began steady, thanking the guests, thanking Daniel, thanking our parents. Words that sounded like any bride's words, except for the undertone that reached me, the slight catch between syllables, the faint uncertainty beneath practiced joy. Then the microphone pulsed again. This time I heard it, faint but undeniable. A compressed burst of sound that carried none of her words. A packet disguised inside her voice, hidden within the celebration. It was transmitting. I froze, breath caught in my throat. My sister's gown shimmered beneath the lights, layers of silk cascading to the floor. And beneath those layers, hidden where no one would ever think to look, something was alive. A transmitter. Michael's eyes found mine across the room. I knew what he was asking without words. Did I see it? Did I believe it? Yes. The toast ended in applause. Emily sat again, her face glowing with the pride of a woman celebrated. Daniel kissed her cheek, and the crowd melted into more chatter, more laughter. But my heart hammered with a different rhythm. I pushed away from my alcove and slipped toward the corridor again. My steps were measured, unhurried, but my mind was already racing. I needed to confirm it. I needed to know if my sister was carrying the very thing that had dragged me back into this world. The side hallway was quieter now, the music muffled through walls thick with history. I leaned against the cool stone and waited. Seconds later, Michael appeared, his face shadowed. "You saw it too," he said. I saw it, I replied, his jaw clenched. The signal's piggybacking through the mic, but it originates from her dress. They're using her. The words struck me like a blow. My sister, so carefully radiant, so meticulously prepared, had been turned into a carrier. A pawn in a game she could not even imagine. They stitched it in, I whispered. Hidden in the fabric. Michael nodded grimly. And if it's what I think it is, they're not just transmitting data, they're rewriting it. Real-time overlays, falsified archives, history being bent while everyone here drinks champagne. I pressed my back to the wall, steadying myself. Images from the past flooded me, the desert storm, the collapsed building, the voices over the comms that had hung me out to dry. Reed's voice telling command to hold, to wait, to let my team burn. And now here he was, somewhere behind the curtain of this day, pulling threads again. Why here? I asked, my voice sharp. Why use her? Michael's eyes were cold. Because no one would suspect the bride. Silence stretched between us. It tasted bitter, heavy. I pushed off the wall and straightened. Then I need to see it myself. Angela, I need to see it, I repeated. His expression hardened, then softened. Finally, he gave the smallest nod. Be careful. If you're right, she's carrying something dangerous. Not just for you, for her. I walked back toward the reception, every step deliberate, my mind already working the angles. My family might never welcome me back. They might prefer me erased from their photographs, their stories, their lives, but Emily was still my sister. And if someone had turned her wedding into a weapon, then I had no choice but to intervene. Because this time, I was not here as a guest. I was here as a soldier. I did not head straight for the bridal suite. That is how you trip alarms you do not know exist. Instead, I let the music pull me back into the reception and drifted along the room's outer ring until my face and pace matched the blur of guests. I circled once, then again, and noted who watched the head table and who pretended not to. The same two plain-clothes men held angles that gave them clean lines on the platform. The technician in gray had vanished from the rack and reappeared near the service corridor with a glass of water he never lifted. The server with the wrong cuff hovered near the microphone like a planet caught in a gentle orbit. A young bridesmaid slipped out through a door-marked powder room. I followed after a count of 10 and caught the door before it kissed the jamb. Inside, the corridor breathed perfume and warm air from the hidden laundry machine that kept pressing steam rolling. The bridesmaid dabbed at mascara in a gilt mirror and never turned. I passed her with a nod, continued through the arch, and found the anteroom to the suite. A pair of shoes waited outside the inner door, satin with crystals that bit the light. Voices murmured on the other side, one older minding details, one younger and brittle at the edges. I knocked once. Silence fell. A pause stretched, then the latch whispered. The planner opened only as far as courtesy required. She wore black and a smile that could cut fruit. The suite is private, she said. I held her gaze. Tell her it is Angela. That name slid through her posture like ice. She considered, then retreated. I heard the rustle of silk, then my sister's voice, a soft please, then the latch again. The door widened. The planner became part of the wallpaper. Emily stood in the mirror light, veil lifted, cheeks warmed by the walk-through attention, pupils still large from the glow of it. For a heartbeat, I only saw the girl who once slept on my floor during thunderstorms and asked if monsters understood rules. Then the present rushed back. The gown flowed around her in layered cream, the train arrayed like a silk tide. Beauty draped over a problem. Her mouth moved first. You cannot be here. I stepped inside and shut the door with a gentle click. I can, and I must. She recoiled from the certainty, not from me. The mirror caught us both and made a portrait no one would hang. A bride who wanted a simple story. A sister who had come to ruin the grammar. If you are here to make a scene, she said, save it for the people who enjoy them. I did not answer. Answering is often how you lose the timing. I let the silence stay until her shoulders rose and fell. What do you want, Angela? The truth, I said, and your trust for the next 5 minutes. Her laugh was a small break in glass. You have earned neither. I walked to the vanity, set my clutch down, and removed my gloves with slow precision. I did it as if she had already agreed. I kept my voice level. Something in this room is transmitting. She shook her head. No, that is ridiculous. You felt it and did not have words for it. The way the air vibrated when you spoke into the mic. The way your skin prickled as if lights were too warm. The way your heart jumped where it should not. Her eyes betrayed her before her mouth could lie. She crossed her arms and looked away into the silvered glass. Her reflection did not blink. I know how that sounds, I said. I also know the language of rooms like this when they have been turned into instruments. The signal rides the obvious pathway so that anyone who checks can swear it was harmless. It is not harmless. They have hidden a relay in your dress. She turned then, anger rising through fear. Of all the ways to make this about you, you chose this, on my wedding day. With everyone I love in the next room, this is not about me, it was the calmest truth I had. She flinched at its shape. Anger does not like calm. She moved to the window and lifted the edge of the curtain as if the view below might offer a better story. Late sun poured across the lawn and turned the string lights into threads of gold. Voices floated up like a softer weather. Who is they? She asked without facing me. Names you do not need unless you want to be afraid forever. You do not. You need to let me check the hem. She kept her back to me. I watched the tendons along her neck hold a small war. Then, with a brittle exhale, she set the curtain down. If you cut this dress, she said, I will never forgive you. I will not cut what I do not have to. Let me see the inner lining. A quick inspection. If I am wrong, I will leave and you will never see me again. That last sentence was a gamble. The planner shifted like a bird startled by glass. Emily closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was not a bride or a child. She was a woman who understood that some doors, once opened, will not shut without a price. Fine, she said. 5 minutes. I knelt and the silk hissed softly as it settled. My fingers knew what to look for. Hem weights that did not match weight. Thread that caught light at a frequency wrong for couture. A tiny mismatch in the pattern where a seam had been unpicked and resewn by a hand that was mechanical, not artistic. There, I said, not for effect, only to mark the moment for myself. I slipped a narrow tool from the clutch, thin to the width of a hair, and slid it beneath the seam. A whisper of pressure, the tiniest give. A panel lifted like a secret. Behind it, a sliver of engineered metal sat in a custom cradle. 3 rivets like points on a compass. No logo, no brand, only work. Emily made a sound I had not heard since we were young. Not fear. Disbelief trying to become a thought. The planner took a step forward, then stopped, instructions fighting instinct. What is it? Emily asked. A passive relay that wakes when the host breathes a specific rhythm. It listens, it collects, it forwards. Paired to the microphone, it converts breath and voice into a payload. From the floor rack, it rides a back channel out of the estate. If they meant it only to observe, they would not care about the timing. The timing is precise. That means they're also using you to push a narrative back into a system that will rewrite what once was. She swallowed. In English. It pretends to be a wedding. It turns your voice into a key. It opens a door in a vault I have been trying to keep intact. She sank onto the vanity bench like her bones had remembered gravity. She did not cry. She pressed her fingers to her temple and said, very softly, this day was supposed to be mine. I know, I said. I am sorry you have to share it with ghosts. Who would do this to me? People who do not mind tearing a silk dress to get to a door no one else can see. People who count on you never believing it. She looked up at me then with a sudden and startling clarity. You think Daniel knew? The question hit the room like a small explosion. I weighed the wrong answers and did not pick one. I do not know, I said. Which means I will not accuse him for you. She took that in and did not accept it, which I respected. She stood and crossed to a small wardrobe where a satin robe hung. She lifted it, then let it fall. If I let you remove it, can I still walk back out there as a bride? Or do you want me to walk out as a headline? I can take it without tearing the dress. I cannot promise the people who put it there will leave you alone if we take their toy away. If we take it quietly, we can keep it talking while it speaks to me instead of them. I can route its signal into a sandbox and listen. That will buy us proof. And if we leave it, she said, then your vows will feed a machine that has already eaten enough of my life, and now wants yours. She closed her eyes again. 5 seconds. 10. When she opened them, she nodded once. Do it. I slid the tool in again, followed the seam, and eased the cradle out like a surgeon removing a seed lodged beside a nerve. The relay hummed against the metal and then accepted the isolation of my pocket unit. My watch throbbed once. The signal now fed the small reader in my clutch and looped back a decoy heartbeat to the rack. To anyone listening, it would feel as if the bride still breathed her programmed rhythm. In truth, the payload belonged to me. The planner whispered, we have to be in position in 10 minutes. We will, I said. Give us 3. She hesitated, then did what good planners do. She cut 2 minutes from somewhere else and left. Emily stood very still while I adjusted the seam. The dress settled back around her like a secret closed. Her hands trembled once and then were steady. I asked without turning, why did you not tell me you were getting married? She let out a breath that sounded like old paper. Because when I tell you things, they become different than the things I meant. I wanted one thing in my life that did not change shape when you looked at it. That landed where it should. Between us, not as an accusation, but as an artifact. I secured the lining and rose. She faced me fully now. Her eyes were clear in a way that made me wonder how long she had been pretending to be fine. If I walk back out there, she said, can you keep them from using me again? I can try. The people who orchestrated this are not in the habit of quitting, but I am also not in the habit of losing. You always talk like that, she said, without heat. Like the end has to be a clean word. It never is, I said, but I am learning to write the mess without letting it write me. She surprised me then. She stepped in and touched my arm with 2 fingers, a small press that remembered childhood and forgave nothing and still reached. Thank you, she said. Do not make me regret this. I will do my best. She half smiled and the room changed temperature. For a second I believed we could walk the next hour without shattering it. There was a sound at the door. The planner returned with a final call. I slipped the pocket unit deeper into the clutch and watched the screen bloom with coded symbols. The relay spoke a language I knew well: timing tags, command headers, an instruction set disguised as residual noise. I would need the backend to unravel the destination. I would need help. I angled the clutch so the tiny camera in its lid could watch the hallway when we left, then nodded to Emily. Ready? She lifted her veil. The gesture transformed her again into the woman the crowd expected. We moved into the corridor. A wave of soft exclamations greeted her at the arch that opened onto the reception floor. The music adjusted its spine. Laughter brightened. The planner smiled in that way professionals smile when a storm has passed, and no one noticed the roof tremble. I let Emily go first. This was still her day until someone tried to steal it a second time. I stepped behind her and felt the room's gaze turn like a flock of birds. My mother's hand flew to her pearls and then lowered. My father's mouth opened a fraction and closed, like a door tested and found unready. Daniel watched his bride with the relief of a man who thinks the world will allow him an easy hour. The officiant called the room to order for a blessing before the first dance. People rose. Chairs whispered against polished floor. I stood at the fringe and let the relay speak to me in its thin mechanical confession. The pocket unit translated a line. Directive Tag 9A Overlay Authorization Pending. Target File Vanguard. Revision Tree Append. Signer R09. The letters were a key I had not seen in years. Cold slid along my spine and settled where my anger used to live. They were not only watching, they were writing. I felt someone move to my shoulder without the soft announcement of perfume or starch. Michael. He did not look at me, he looked at the couple. His voice was quiet enough to be a thought. You found it. Yes, is it live? Very, and arrogant. He let out a breath that wanted to be a laugh and did not risk it. We will need the rack. We will need the whole room, I said. And a screen? Not yet, he replied. Let it talk. Let it hang itself with its own rope. I have a path into the secondary input. When you say go, I can turn their pipe into a mirror. We watched the blessing unfold like a well-rehearsed scene. Words washed through the air that would look beautiful in the photographs. The relay fed more tags. A countdown appeared in the corner of my reader. A time the size of a heartbeat multiplied. When it hit 0, something would leave this estate and slide across a network that could bury me again with a sharper shovel. I closed my clutch and set my mouth into the shape of a woman at a wedding who has prepared herself to behave. Emily glanced back once, only for a fraction, and I tipped my head a degree. Not a smile. A promise. The music swelled. The couple stepped into their first dance and the guests softened around them like water. The lights fell warmer. Cameras lifted. The choreographed memory began. Beneath the song, the hum deepened. The relay ticked toward its hour. I did not pray. I counted. The way I always have when there is a door and a lock and a voice on the other side telling the story wrong. 5, 4, 3. I lifted my eyes to the rack across the room where a small green light refused to believe it could be seen. 2. Michael shifted his weight like a man about to move through a crowded street without touching anyone. 1. The timer rolled to 0 and the pocket unit bloomed with confirmation. They were pushing, which meant I could pull. I touched the comm bead that rested like a freckle along my ear and spoke for the first time tonight as the person I had hidden in plain sight. Now, Michael did not hesitate. His hands moved as if they already knew the pattern of the board without seeing it. Across the room, the technician in gray stiffened, sensing something shift in the invisible current, but by then it was already too late. The back-channel link had been rerouted. The relay that had been riding on Emily's voice now poured into my clutch, looping through a dummy server Michael had spun up. To everyone else in the room, it was still a wedding. To us, it had become a live wire. The first dance continued. Emily's gown rippled with each slow turn, light pooling in folds of silk. Daniel held her with the softness of someone convinced the world was still in his hands. The guests swayed at the edges, phones raised, smiles fixed. None of them knew that every step on the dance floor sent another line of code, another fragment of history, into a waiting maw that would rewrite it. I eased along the perimeter, my fingers resting lightly on the clutch. The small screen inside showed raw packets, strings of numbers and letters scrolling like rain on glass. Buried in the noise were headers I recognized from years ago: Operation Vanguard, revision protocols, authentication tags that should have been locked in a secure archive. My stomach tightened. They were not just transmitting, they were altering, with Emily as the unwitting trigger. Michael drifted closer, never looking at me directly. His voice was barely a thread. They're pushing a full overwrite. 2 minutes, maybe 3 before the payload completes. Can you stop it? I whispered. I can mirror it, but to stop it, we have to expose them. If we cut it clean, they'll blame you, Angela. They'll claim you planted it. I kept my eyes on my sister. Then we show them the truth. The music swelled and broke into applause as the dance ended. The officiant stepped back to the microphone to introduce the next toast. My father, of course. He rose, adjusting his cufflinks, a smile carefully measured. His voice filled the room, rich and authoritative, a man speaking of legacy, of family, of values. My reader pulsed red. Each word was a keystroke, each sentence a command. He was unknowingly feeding the script. Emily's eyes flicked once toward me, a glimmer of unease behind the practiced joy. She felt it too. She just didn't know how to name it. I moved toward the platform, slipping between tables with the grace of someone long used to moving through crowded places without being touched. My father's speech rolled on, familiar and foreign at once. And may the Bowen name always stand for honor and truth. My hand closed around the edge of the podium before anyone realized I was there. I reached past the floral arrangement and snapped the auxiliary cable from its port. The green light on the rack blinked once, twice, and then died. The sound system hissed softly as if exhaling. The room did not notice at first. My father was still talking, the microphone still hot, but the pipeline was severed. The payload was in my hands now. Michael's voice brushed my ear. I've got it. Recording everything. Full trace on origin. Keep them looking at you. I lifted the microphone and spoke, not to the room but to my sister. Emily. Her head turned, veil catching the light. The room hushed. The weight of hundreds of eyes settled on me. Emily, I said again, louder now, my voice steady. There's something you need to see. Daniel moved, half rising. My father's mouth opened in outrage. My mother's pearls caught between her fingers. But Emily stepped forward, confusion and fear flickering across her face. I reached into my clutch and held up the relay between my thumb and forefinger. Small, innocuous, a fragment of metal no one would recognize. This, I said, my voice carrying now, was sewn into your dress. Gasps, murmurs. The photographer lowered his camera. Daniel froze. My father's color drained a shade. It was using your voice, I said. Your vows, your blessings, to send and rewrite classified records, to erase people, to erase me. For a moment there was only the sound of the quartet faltering, strings sliding into silence. Then a man near the back moved too quickly. The technician in gray reached for something under his jacket. Michael was already there, intercepting, his movement fluid, quiet, the kind of control that keeps a scene from turning into panic. He disarmed the man with a subtle twist, pocketed whatever device he held, and steered him toward a security officer who suddenly found his courage. Daniel staggered forward, his face pale. Emily, what is she talking about? Emily's gaze darted between me, Daniel, our father, her hands trembled. She spoke in a voice barely audible. Is it true? Silence. My father's jaw clenched. He said nothing. Michael lifted his phone, projecting a mirror of the data stream onto the large screen at the back of the hall. Lines of code scrolled like a confession. Dates, times, operation names. Every guest could see it now, every camera recording it. The hum of conversation turned to a buzz of shock. I turned to my father. You told them I betrayed my country. You let them write me out of history, but you knew. His eyes met mine at last. A flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or fear, crossed his face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said nothing. Not yet. Emily stepped down from the platform, her dress whispering against the floor. She reached me, her eyes wide, her voice shaking. Why me? Why my wedding? Because no one suspects the bride, I said softly. Because they thought I would stay gone. The room felt like a held breath. Every guest waiting for the next line, the next reveal. Michael's screen flashed a final tag. Payload intercepted. Origin confirmed. R09 read, the name that had hung over every lost year of my life. I looked out over the sea of faces, some still not understanding, some beginning to. This is not just a wedding, I said. This is a crime scene. And in that moment the perfect day cracked. The hum was gone. In its place rose the sound of cameras clicking, guests whispering, phones lighting up with news alerts. The mask had slipped. The first twist had landed. Emily's hand found mine, small and cold. For the first time in years, her voice held no distance. "What do we do now?" I squeezed her fingers once, firm. "We finish what they started, and then we take it back." The reception dissolved into chaos after my words. Guests whispered furiously, half in disbelief, half in hungry curiosity. Phones lit up like fireflies, recording, streaming, seizing fragments of truth and spectacle. Emily stood frozen beside me, her bouquet trembling in her grip. My father barked something about composure, about dignity, but the weight of silence that followed was heavier than any words he could summon. The technician in gray was gone by the time security crossed the floor. Michael had melted into the current of guests, shadowing rather than striking. That was his way. I stayed visible because sometimes the best shield is the one that makes you undeniable. The efficient, pale and sweating, tried to regain control of the evening, calling for calm, urging guests to remain seated. But the crowd was no longer listening. The spell of the wedding had broken. The room now belonged to suspicion and to fear. I caught Emily's arm before anyone else could. Her eyes darted wildly between me and Daniel. "What have you done?" she whispered, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. It wasn't only anger. It was doubt and the first edge of realization. "Not me," I said. "Them, the ones who put that device in your dress." Her hand tightened around the bouquet until petals bent and snapped. "You're ruining everything." "Or saving it," I countered, softer than I meant to. Daniel stepped forward then, his face pale, his voice too loud. "This is insane." "Angela, you've always been." He stopped because the words he wanted carried a weight he couldn't afford in front of cameras. "Difficult." He shifted, eyes flicking to my father for backup. My father's face was carved from stone. He said nothing. That silence spoke more than defense ever could. The planner reappeared, fluttering, trying to herd Emily away. "We need to fix your veil, darling, just a moment." "No," Emily snapped, surprising everyone including herself. She jerked her arm free. "Not until someone tells me what's happening." Eyes fell on me. For the first time in years, I didn't lower mine. Michael appeared at my side, close enough that only I could hear. "We can't stay here. Too many ears, too many lenses." He was right. The ballroom was a stage and we needed a shadow. I turned to Emily. "If you want answers, come with me now. If you don't, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering." Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, I thought she would turn away. But then she stepped toward me, the bouquet falling from her hand to the polished floor. The sound it made, soft, final, was louder than applause. We slipped through the side corridor, Michael guarding our backs. The hallway was lined with gilded mirrors, chandeliers dimmed for elegance. It smelled of wax and lemon polish, a place meant to impress in silence. I guided Emily into a small service room, the kind where estates hide their machinery. The hum of refrigeration units filled the air, low and steady, covering our voices. Michael closed the door, his body a quiet wall against intrusion. Emily turned on me at once. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes blazing. "Tell me everything, now." I reached into my clutch and set the relay on the metal counter. Its light pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat unwilling to die. "This was inside your dress. It carried your voice, your breath, as a key." It was transmitting to the system in the reception hall, which was connected to a secure archive. They were rewriting history through you. She stared at it as though it might sprout fangs. "That's impossible." "Not impossible," I said quietly. "Just cruel." Michael's voice was steady. "We intercepted the data. We have proof it was tied to Operation Vanguard." Emily's gaze snapped to me. "Vanguard, that's the thing they said. The thing they said I failed," I finished for her. "The thing that erased me from their stories. Reed and his allies are still trying to bury the truth, only this time they wanted to use you to do it. Because who would suspect the bride?" Emily's face crumpled. She sank into a chair, hands pressed to her mouth. "My God, all those months of fittings, the constant adjustments, they weren't just tailoring, they were planting this." "Exactly." She looked at me with eyes that were suddenly very young. "Angela, if this is true, then I was never just a bride today." I reached for her hand. "No, you were bait." The word hung between us, raw and heavy. Emily's breath came fast. Daniel's name slipped from her lips, quiet, uncertain. Michael shook his head. "We don't know how deep he's in, but Reed is here, somewhere, waiting for this to play out." I stood, straightened my jacket, and met my sister's eyes. "You asked me what we do now. We fight back, together, or we let them erase both of us." Her lips trembled. She nodded once, fiercely, like breaking something inside her. And for the first time since the envelope arrived at my door, I felt the faintest weight of family return, not in the smiles of the crowd, not in my parents' silence, but in my sister's grip on my hand. The hum of the refrigeration units filled the small room like an artificial heartbeat. Emily sat hunched forward, veil slipping from her hair, hands clenched tight in her lap. The glow from the relay pulsed on the counter between us, steady and merciless. Michael leaned against the door, his arms folded but his eyes never resting, scanning the shadows as if the walls themselves might breathe. I crouched to meet Emily's eyes. "You wanted the truth. This is it. They've been using you, and they would have kept using you until there was nothing left to question." She shook her head, not in denial but in disbelief. "My own wedding," she whispered. "Every fitting, every stitch, I thought it was for me." "They counted on that," I said. "On your trust, on your blindness." Her eyes brimmed with anger now, not just fear. "Who, Angela? Who could want this badly enough to?" The door rattled softly. Michael tensed. His hand slid toward the inside of his jacket. He tilted his head in a way that told me, "Wait." The rattle came again, followed by a knock. Calm, polite. "Miss Bowen?" The voice was smooth, steady. "It's Daniel. May I come in?" Emily jerked upright. "Daniel." Her voice was already moving toward him, but I caught her wrist. "Don't," I said. Her gaze snapped to mine, torn between trust and instinct. "He's my husband." "He's also the man standing outside a locked door while a relay pulses in your dress," I countered. The knock came again, firmer. "Emily, please, they said you needed a moment. I need to see you." Michael shifted his weight and leaned close to me. "We can let him in," he whispered, but not without control. I nodded. "Louder, one moment." I slipped the relay into my clutch, slid the pocket unit over it, and closed the clasp. The pulse vanished from sight but not from mind. Emily stood trembling near the vanity, her veil now completely askew. I opened the door. Daniel stood in the hall, his tuxedo sharp, his expression carved from worry. His eyes flicked past me to Emily, softening instantly. "Em, what's happening? People are saying the strangest things out there." Emily's breath caught. "Daniel, did you know?" He blinked. "Know what?" I watched him carefully. His hands were loose at his sides, not clenched. His pupils didn't flare, but his pause was a beat too long, enough to plant a seed of doubt. "About this," Emily said, her voice breaking as she pointed at her gown. "About something sewn into me, about Angela finding it." Daniel's gaze darted to me, then back to her. "No," he said quickly, too quickly. "Emily, you know how she is. Don't," Emily snapped. Her voice cracked like a whip. "Don't dismiss her, not this time." For the first time, Daniel faltered. His mask slipped. He reached for her hands, but she stepped back, away from him, toward me. That tiny movement, the distance, was everything. Michael spoke from the doorway, his voice low but edged. "If you didn't know, then prove it. Tell us who's paying the technician at the soundboard. Tell us why there's a secondary feed running through the estate's network." Daniel's face drained of color. He tried to cover it with outrage, but the silence was already louder. "Emily," I said softly, "look at him, you'll know." She did. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. She looked at him long enough to understand. Then she stepped back again. Daniel's voice cracked. "I did it for us, for our future. Do you know what they promised? Do you know what we could have had?" "What we?" Emily's voice broke. "You put me in their hands. You let them use me like a weapon." His jaw clenched. He turned on me then, fury rising. "You ruined this. You ruined everything, just like before." Before, the word cut like glass. It tied him directly to Reed, to Vanguard, to every scar I carried. Michael moved before Daniel could step closer. His hand pressed against Daniel's chest, firm and unyielding. "We're done here." Daniel glared at him, then at me, then finally at Emily. His voice was a whisper, raw and desperate. "You'll regret this." Emily's answer was silence. But she turned to me, and for the first time since the day began, she stood at my side. Daniel left with security flanking him, his shoulders stiff with rage. The door closed, leaving the three of us in the hum of the machines once more. Emily let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I married a traitor." I set my hand on her shoulder. "No, you married a mask, now you've torn it off." Michael checked his watch. "We don't have much time. Reed will know the pipeline is broken. He'll move to cover it. That means we need to move faster." Emily turned to me, her face pale but steady. "What do we do now?" I opened my clutch again. The relay glowed faintly, its pulse slowed but alive. I felt its weight in my palm like a promise. "We follow the signal," I said, "all the way to the source." And with that, the room that had been a hiding place became a war room. The reception hall had become a cage of whispers by the time we returned. Guests huddled in small knots, voices tight, glances darting toward the head table where my parents sat stiff and silent. The chandelier still glowed golden, the quartet still played, but the music was drowned beneath a rising tension. Everyone knew something had cracked. No one yet knew how deep the fracture ran. Emily walked beside me, her veil pinned clumsily back in place, her bouquet gone. She moved like a ghost in her own celebration, shoulders tight, eyes sharp. Michael trailed a few steps behind us, his gaze sweeping every face, every angle. He looked less like a guest now and more like what he truly was, an operative walking into hostile ground. The officiant scrambled to the microphone again, his hands trembling as he tapped for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, let us continue with joy. The bride and groom will—" His words faltered as he caught sight of us crossing the room. The crowd turned as one, like water shifting with the tide. I didn't let the silence stretch. I walked straight to the raised platform, past the abandoned champagne glasses and half-eaten canapés, and took the microphone from its stand. Gasps fluttered across the room like startled birds. "My name is Angela Bowen," I said, my voice steady, filling every corner of the hall. "Some of you know me as Emily's sister. Most of you don't know me at all. That's because for years my name has been erased, my history rewritten. Tonight, they tried to erase me again, using her." Emily lifted her chin, standing just behind me. The crowd leaned forward, curiosity and unease pressing them closer. I opened my clutch, withdrew the relay, and held it up. Its faint green light blinked against the chandelier glow. This was sewn into her dress. Not an ornament, not a charm, a transmitter. While you were raising your glasses, while she was speaking her vows, this device was sending classified data across this room. Data that would alter official records, destroy evidence, and rewrite the past. The room buzzed with disbelief, outrage, fear. A few guests laughed nervously, the way people do when truth collides with comfort. But others began filming, phones lifted high. The air was thick with the scent of roses and panic. Michael moved to the audio rig, his fingers quick, efficient. The massive screen behind the platform flickered once, then bloomed to life. Lines of code scrolled in stark white on black, accompanied by fragments of images, grainy video, suppressed reports, names of operatives long forgot. Gasps rose as the guests realized what they were seeing. "This," I continued, my voice cutting through the noise, "is Operation Vanguard, the mission I was part of, the mission they told you I betrayed. Look closely. You'll see who gave the order to delay rescue. You'll see whose voice condemned civilians to die while mine carried the blame." The first video rolled. The projection showed a battlefield bathed in smoke, figures moving through rubble, cries over comms. Then came the voice. Reed's voice. Calm, authoritative, telling command to hold, to wait, to let the line collapse. The timestamp burned into the corner. My name tagged on the after-action report, marked as responsible. The guests gasped, some covering their mouths, others shaking their heads. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, voices overlapping. "This can't be real." They lied. She was a scapegoat. I let them see it all. The documents, the signatures, the shifting reports that framed me as a traitor. And then, most damning of all, the hidden directive, R09 Reed. The name burned across the screen. A man stood near the back of the hall, his face red, his jaw tight. Senator Blake. He surged forward, his voice booming. "Enough! This is fabricated, a pathetic attempt to poison a sacred occasion." "Do not be deceived." Michael cut the feed to static, then back again, this time showing Blake's signature beneath an authorization order for a file purge. His voice cracked through the hall, replayed from a recording. "If she takes the fall, no one will dig deeper." The hall erupted. Voices shouting, cameras flashing. Blake stumbled back, pale, sweat beading his forehead. I raised my voice above the storm. "This is what they do. They bury the truth. They use families, weddings, lives as camouflage. But not tonight. Tonight, the truth speaks louder than their lies." Emily stepped beside me then, her hand trembling but her voice clear. "She's telling the truth. I was their pawn. I let them dress me, fit me, make me believe this was my day, but it was never about me. It was about control. And I will not be silent." The guests gasped again, their shock turning into something sharper, anger, empathy, awakening. I looked across the crowd, past the phones, past the fear, straight at the men who thought they could erase me. "You wanted to rewrite the story, but you forgot one thing: I'm still here." The screen behind me froze on Reed's face, captured in grainy still from a field camera, his lips mid-command. The silence that followed was not disbelief this time. It was the silence of people realizing they had been watching a lie for years. And then the shouting began. The silence after the projection broke was not the silence of disbelief. It was heavier, sharper, the silence of people trying to measure what they had just seen against what they had been told for years. The chandeliers still glittered, but the room felt darker, the air tight. Then the shouting began. Guests surged to their feet, some demanding answers, others pulling out phones to record every flicker of the screen. My mother's hand gripped my father's arm, her pearls trembling at her throat. My father sat frozen, his face pale but defiant, eyes fixed on me with a fury that barely masked fear. Senator Blake was shouting over the crowd, his voice hoarse, trying to drown the storm. Lies, fabrications, this woman has always been unstable. You cannot trust. The screen behind me betrayed him again. Michael had cued the next clip, Blake in a private briefing, leaning close to Reed, his words captured in grainy audio. If she takes the fall, the trail ends here. Bowen disappears and the rest of us stay clean. The guests roared. Some screamed. A woman dropped her champagne glass, the shatter punctuating the chaos. Emily stepped forward, her voice slicing through the noise. You used me. You put this in my gown. She pointed at the relay still glowing faintly in my hand. You let me walk in front of my family, my friends, as a puppet for your scheme. I am not your pawn, and I will not be silent. Her voice cracked, but the strength in it carried across the room. The guests turned their eyes from her to Blake, to my father, to the shadows where Reed had not yet appeared but where everyone now knew he lingered. Security moved then, not toward Blake or my father but toward me. Black-suited men with earpieces, cutting through the chaos like blades. One of them shouted, Ms. Bowen, you're under immediate custody for breach of national security. The room gasped again. Some guests stepped back, others surged forward with phones raised higher, recording every second. I held my ground. Of course, when truth surfaces, they try to bury it under chains. I raised the relay higher. But this time the evidence is already out. Every phone in this room has captured it. Every live stream has carried it beyond these walls. You cannot erase me twice. Michael moved subtly between me and the advancing security men, his voice low in my ear. They'll try force. We need to move. Emily clutched my arm. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. No. If you leave now, they'll brand you a fugitive all over again. Stay, Angela. Let the world see them drag you. Let everyone watch. Her words sliced straight to the truth I hadn't wanted to face. She was right. Disappearing into the shadows would only repeat the cycle. Staying in the light, exposed, vulnerable, was the only way to break it. I turned back to the crowd, lifted the microphone again. Do you see them? Do you see who they protect and who they attack? The ones who sewed lies into a wedding gown are untouched. The ones who uncovered it stand accused. This is their justice. This is their truth. The guards closed in. One reached for my wrist, and then the lights cut out. The chandeliers died, the music stopped mid-note, the room plunged into darkness. Screams rose, phones glowed, chaos swelled. My clutch vibrated with a fresh pulse of data, the relay still alive, still sending, but no longer to my screen. Someone else had taken control. Michael's voice was sharp beside me. He's here. A single light flared at the back of the hall. Reed. His silhouette stood against the glow, tall, unflinching, as if he owned the dark. His voice carried over the chaos, calm, commanding, chillingly familiar. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen enough to believe what she wants you to believe. Now it's time you hear the truth. The crowd froze, torn between fear and fascination. Cameras turned, phones lifted. Reed stepped forward, every eye following him. The real battle had just begun. The hall was suspended in darkness except for Reed's silhouette. He stood at the back of the room as if he had been there all along, waiting for the exact moment to step into the light. Guests huddled together, phones trembling in their hands, every lens catching his face as though history itself wanted proof. The air carried his presence like static. Calm, controlled, the kind of authority that doesn't need shouting. When he finally spoke, his voice filled every corner with chilling ease. You think you've uncovered a conspiracy, Reed said. You think your cameras have caught me unprepared, but what you've seen tonight is not truth, it's theater. The guests murmured uneasily, shifting like waves against a rock. Reed lifted his hand. A second projection lit the far wall. Not Michael's feed, not my evidence, but something else entirely. Carefully edited video spliced from real footage and falsified overlays. In it, I stood on the battlefield years ago, issuing an order that condemned civilians. My voice spliced, altered, rang through the speakers. Hold position, delay rescue. We can't risk exposure. Gasps broke across the room. People looked from the screen to me, their doubt cutting sharper than any weapon. Emily's grip on my arm tightened. Angela, that's not you? Reed smiled faintly. Of course it's her. She admits it herself. A traitor once, a traitor always. Michael moved toward the projection rig, but the guards were faster. They flanked Reed now, their posture not of men protecting truth, but protecting their master. He had orchestrated everything, the gown, the relay, even the counter footage. Ladies and gentlemen, Reed continued, his tone measured, persuasive, terrifying in its calm. This woman was erased for a reason, because she betrayed her own. And tonight she attempted to sabotage her sister's wedding with lies, hoping to claw back the spotlight she lost. What you've seen on that screen was manipulated by her ally. He nodded toward Michael. A man dismissed from service for insubordination. Together they staged this farce. The guests shifted, confusion now mixing with fear. I saw doubt in their eyes. The narrative was slipping, being pulled back into Reed's grasp. He was too good, too rehearsed. I stepped forward, raising my voice. If I betrayed them, then why hide me? Why erase me instead of putting me on trial? Because they needed a scapegoat without questions. They needed a ghost. Reed's smile didn't falter. He waved a hand and the projection shifted again. Images flashed me in shadows, me handling coded documents, me standing with armed figures in alleys, each clip carefully edited to frame me as a conspirator. Half-truths sewn into a damning hole. Because you were dangerous, Reed said softly, like a verdict. And you still are. The crowd erupted into chaos, some shouting at me, others at Reed, most unsure whom to believe. Emily's voice cut through the storm. No, I saw it, she pulled it out of my dress, I felt it, they used me. Her voice cracked, but it carried. My sister is not lying. Reed's eyes narrowed. Child, you were misled. Dresses can be tampered with, emotions can be twisted. Love makes fools of us all. The guests hesitated again, caught between one story and another. Michael leaned close, his whisper hot in my ear. He's flipping the narrative. If we don't turn it now, you'll lose them. I looked at Emily. She was trembling but unbroken, standing in front of hundreds of eyes with her wedding unraveling around her. Her trust was the only unshakable truth I had. I raised the relay high again. This device doesn't lie. Every packet it sent is still stored. And you know it, Reed, because your signature lives in those commands. The projection glitched for half a second, just long enough for me to see it, the cracks. Reed's false stream was running in parallel with ours, but Michael had managed to seed a fragment of our original feed back into it. For a moment, Reed's voice overlapped with mine, contradicting itself. The lie was visible. Gasps rippled again. Someone shouted, "It doesn't match." Another voice yelled, "Show us both feeds." The room was tipping, teetering between two versions of reality. Reed's calm began to crack. His jaw tightened. His eyes burned into mine with a warning that felt colder than death. "Careful, Angela," he said. "Truth is a weapon that cuts both ways." I didn't look away. "Then let it cut." The light surged back on, flooding the hall with brilliance. The chandeliers blazed, the quartet dropped their bows, and every face turned toward us. The stage was set, not for my erasure this time, but for a reckoning. The chandeliers blazed so bright it felt like daylight had flooded the Harrow estate. The hall, once meant for vows and celebration, was now a courtroom with no judge, only witnesses, and one predator trying to rewrite the verdict in real time. Reed stood calm, a storm caged inside his shoulders. The projection behind him still played the doctored clips, me as the betrayer, me as the ghost he wanted everyone to believe I was. The crowd whispered, some leaning toward his version, some toward mine, but all teetering. Emily stepped forward, her gown trembling around her ankles. "You forged this," she said, pointing at the screen. Her voice shook, but she forced it louder. "I felt that relay sewn against my skin. I know it wasn't her doing. You used me." Reed gave her a patronizing smile, smooth as silk. "You're emotional, Emily. This is your wedding day. You've been manipulated by your sister, by a woman who thrives on chaos. She's always thrived on it." The guests murmured again. Doubt is a contagion, but so is courage. Emily's chin lifted. "No, I saw the seam. I saw her take it out. If you deny it, then show us your hands, show us your people." For the first time, Reed's expression hardened. His fingers curled at his side and the guards shifted, sensing his tension. Michael moved subtly near the projection rig, his hands brushing over the panel he'd already seated. He caught my eye, ready. I drew a breath, my heart thundering. "You want them to believe me a traitor?" I said, my voice steady, carrying over the restless crowd. "Then let's show them what your truth looks like when it collides with mine." I gave the smallest nod. The screen split. On the left, Reed's carefully manufactured feed played me, issuing false orders, condemning civilians. On the right, Michael's restored stream unspooled. Reed's real voice, his command to delay rescue, his signature authorizing the purge, the cold precision of a man writing death into silence. The contrast was devastating. The room erupted. Shouts, gasps, disbelief, and then fury. Guests surged closer, phones raised, some screaming Reed's name, others demanding answers. Reed's mask cracked. Just for an instant, the calm shattered and the predator underneath showed his teeth. His voice snapped like a whip. "Shut it down!" The guards surged toward the rig. Michael intercepted one, twisting his wrist until the man dropped his weapon. Another guard lunged at me, but Emily, my fragile porcelain sister, stepped between us, veil torn, eyes blazing. "You will not touch her." The hall thundered with voices. My father shouted for order, my mother clutched her pearls so hard the strands snapped, and beads scattered across the floor like tiny truths no one could gather. Reed tried to shout over them, but this time no one was listening. His lies and my evidence were now tangled together, and the crowd had seen the seams. He couldn't erase that. I raised the relay high one last time. "This is the story they wanted to bury. You've seen both versions. Now you decide which one is real. The one that erases or the one that survives?" Phones everywhere captured every word, every face, every second. It was already beyond this room. Reed knew it. His jaw tightened, his eyes burned into me with a promise this wasn't over. And then, with terrifying calm, he smiled again. "Careful, Angela, you've made yourself visible, and visibility has a cost." Security hesitated, the crowd pressing closer, the whole hall trembling between justice and violence. But I had what I needed. Proof in every hand, doubt in every eye, and my sister standing beside me at last. The twist wasn't that Reed had tried to frame me again. The twist was that this time, the erasure failed. For the first time in years, I wasn't just fighting to survive. I was fighting to win. The reception hall had transformed into a battlefield without a single shot fired. Voices ricocheted against the gilded walls, a storm of disbelief, rage, and revelation. Phones gleamed like 100 tiny spotlights, every lens turned on Reed, every second streaming beyond these walls. The chandeliers blazed overhead, but the air itself felt volatile, thick with tension ready to snap. Reed didn't flinch. He stood at the center of the chaos as though he'd orchestrated even this moment, calm and unyielding, the predator who never ran. His eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto mine. "You think truth is your ally," he said, his voice slicing through the noise. "But truth is nothing without power, and power belongs to those who can shape the story." He lifted his hand, and the guards at the perimeter moved in again, this time more aggressive. Chairs toppled, guests screamed, some tried to flee, others pressed closer for a better view. Emily clutched my arm, her breath ragged, but she didn't step back. Michael was already moving. His hands flew across the projection rig, patching, rerouting, his face hard with focus. "We're live to every major feed now," he whispered, his voice tight. "Whatever happens here, the world is watching." That was when I realized the final trap Reed had set. He wasn't afraid of the truth being seen. He wanted this confrontation in the open. Because win or lose, chaos gave him another narrative to spin. I steadied myself. "You erased me once. You won't again." Reed's smile was thin, cruel. "You erased yourself, Angela. You followed orders without question, and when it all fell apart, you ran. That's who you are, a shadow who survives by blame." The crowd roared with conflicting voices. Some believed him, some believed me, but all of them were witnessing. I raised the relay, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. "This was your weapon. Your signature is buried in its code, and every phone in this room has captured it. Erase me if you can, but you can't erase all of them." The words landed. I saw it in the crowd, the shift, the anger tilting away from me and toward him. Reed's jaw tightened. For the first time, his calm cracked. He barked an order I couldn't hear, and suddenly the lights cut again, plunging us into shadows. Screams erupted. The sound of boots hit marble. Michael's voice cut through the dark. "He's pulling the plug, we need to move." But Emily's grip on my hand held fast. "No, if you run now, you'll prove him right." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were fierce. "Stay. Make them see." My heart hammered. She was right. The instinct to survive screamed at me to vanish into the dark, but survival had kept me invisible for too long. If I wanted the truth to win, I had to stand where the world could not look away. The emergency lights flickered back on. Reed stood only a few feet away now, his guards forming a wall around him. He looked at me not with triumph, but with something sharper, respect maybe, twisted with hatred. "You want reckoning," he said softly, so only I could hear, though his eyes never left mine. "Then you'd better be ready to pay for it." I met his gaze without blinking. "I already have." The hall held its breath. Guests pressed forward, cameras raised, the world watching through 100 lenses. The stage was set for the final reckoning, truth against the architect of lies. And for the first time in years, I felt not erased, not hidden, but exactly where I was meant to be. The room felt like the eye of a storm, still only for a heartbeat before the winds returned to tear everything apart. Reed and I faced each other across a gulf of people, cameras, and years of silence. The chandeliers hissed as the power stuttered back to full strength, bathing the chaos in harsh gold light. "Angela Bowen," Reed said, his voice carrying like a verdict. "You've built your whole life around the idea that you were wronged, But what you forget is this: no one cares about truth. They care about what they can believe, and belief is mine to command. His words rolled across the guests, who clutched their phones tighter, recording, streaming. Some shouted at him, some at me. The crowd was split, but I knew this was the moment to tip them. I stepped forward, raising the relay high. Its green light pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat the whole room could see. "You're right," I said. "Belief is power, and that's why you've built your empire on lies. But here's what you didn't plan for: lies don't survive daylight." I turned to the guests. "Every one of you has seen the seam in his story, the glitch in his proof. You've seen two versions of the past laid side by side. Ask yourselves, who has more to lose if the truth lives, him or me?" The crowd murmured, louder now, pressing harder against the guard's line. I could see doubt spreading across faces that had moments ago leaned toward Reed. Emily stepped forward, veil torn, voice sharp with fury. "You let them use me. You let them stitch their lies into my dress, my vows, my life. You think I'll ever believe you again?" She looked out at the guests, her voice rising. "You all saw it. You felt it in this room. My sister isn't the traitor. He is." The room erupted. Shouts, gasps, even applause. The tide turned. Reed's face darkened, the predator stripped of his mask. He barked an order to his men, and suddenly the guards surged forward. But this time, the crowd pushed back. Guests grabbed chairs, bottles, anything to hold the line. Phones flashed like weapons of light. Michael slipped to my side, his hand brushing my arm. "We've got the feed patched to 3 independent servers. Even if he cuts power now, it's out there. He can't pull it back." Reed must have known it too. His gaze met mine, cold and unflinching. For the first time, though, I saw something new in his eyes, not certainty, not control. Fear. "You've made yourself visible," he said softly, only for me. "And visibility will destroy you." I stepped closer, closing the gap between us until the whole hall could see our faces inches apart. "No," I said, my voice low but steady. "It will destroy you." The guests roared. Reed's guards faltered, overwhelmed by the tide of witnesses. Phones rose higher, recording every second. And just like that, the stage Reed had built to erase me became the platform that ended him. Security, not his men, but a state staff loyal to the venue, pushed in from the sides, seizing the guards, dragging them out as the crowd shouted and filmed. Reed didn't resist. He only stared at me, lips curved into a cold smile. "This isn't the end," he whispered. "No," I agreed. "It's the beginning." Emily took my hand, her fingers tight, grounding me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own family. I felt seen. Michael leaned close, his voice rough but triumphant. "It's out there now. They can't erase you again." The hall was chaos, screams, flashes, the crash of glass, but in the middle of it, I felt calm. The erasure had failed. The truth had lived. And though I knew Reed would find another stage, another story to twist, tonight he had lost. Because I was no longer invisible. Because I had stepped into the light.